Hey everybody, so it's been a really long time since I made a video. My finger was broken and I had an operation and I literally have like two needles sticking out of my hand. But I'm here and I'm here to tell you about this pretty cool stuff that I did. I was really inspired by 3D Bonfire. He makes those really cool abstract simulations, so I left the link to his channel in the description. There's a lot of experimental stuff going inside of this. You always have to experiment with the simulations to make them look the way you want, because it's really hard to art direct this stuff. But without saying anything else, I will start the video. So I will begin by creating a new project, and I'm going to go really roughly into this, because if we are going to try to recreate the whole thing, it's going to take too long and it's going to be boring. I'm going to create a sphere. This is going to be our collider, and I'm going to make it bigger, so like 300%. And since this is a collider, we're gonna set it to hexahedron because it's gonna make all the sides more even. Let's make the segments to 64. And I'm gonna put a collision onto this, and I'm going to hide it from the view. Well, actually, we need it now. We're gonna hide it a little bit later. So let's add a sphere. This is gonna be the emitter. And actually, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. So probably something like this. And let's call this an emitter. This is going to be the collider. So the whole idea is that we have an emission from this sphere, and instead of going all the way to the end, this is going to stop at the collider's walls and form a object. And in our case, this is a sphere. But instead of just doing that, it has to also spin, and we're gonna have to add turbulence to make it like more natural and a little bit more interesting. So onto the emitter, I'm gonna add a simulation tag. This is gonna be a Pyro emitter. And right away, we're gonna have a Pyro output created. This is gonna be the place where we cache the simulation out and where we apply the materials and stuff. So now we can hide the collider, or actually, if you want, if it's going to be more simple to you, we can add a display tag, and over here we can add a lines shading and isoparm, if I called that correctly. This is going to be just more simple in terms of controlling. So let's play. We are going to have to create a much longer composition, so I'm going to set it to 700 frames. Actually, I think 300 frames is going to be okay. So we're going to have to turn off the gravity because we don't want it to go on the bottom or on the top. So I'm going to click Ctrl D, Simulation, Scene, and just set the 0 to the gravity. So let's look at the Pyro. This is going to go just in place. This is just going to stay in one place. So this is where the turbulence comes in. I'm going to add a turbulence, and inside of turbulence, I'm going to set the scale to, well, let's start with 500 and strength to 500. This might be too much or too little, but we're going to have to see. This seems too little. Let's add the strength a little bit. So this looks better, but we are starting to see a new problem. And the problem is that our smoke disappears too fast. And unlike in particles, we don't have a obvious control of lifetime for our smoke. We do have it, but it's not obvious. So let's go inside of the simulation in Ctrl D, in the scene settings, and go inside of Pyro and find density here. And the density dissipation is basically how fast the actual smoke, the dense smoke, disappears. So if we increase this to, for example, 25, and look at the simulation, the smoke starts to disappear much faster. And if we set it to like 90, it's going to disappear too fast, and we're only going to have heat displayed. So I will set this to 2%, and as you see, the smoke disappears much longer. Well, it almost almost does not disappear. So this is the most tricky part. We're gonna have to look at the render, and we're gonna have to look at the simulation, and we're gonna have to control this value. Because a lot of times, once we add the particles, the simulation might bug out a little bit because the density is gonna be so big that our particles are gonna be just stuck in one part, and this is gonna look really, really bad. So this is probably one of the most important values that we're gonna have to control. As you see, we have smoke going out of the collider object. If I'm not wrong, the minimum substeps and the maximum substeps might help with this. So we can set the values lower and it's still going to be much better. So another pretty important value is the density, and I completely forgot about it because the higher the density is, the logically the more dense the smoke is. So if I set the density to, for example, 1 and the density at 220, and I don't actually know exactly what each value does, but like as always, I just play with the values until I see what I need. So I'm gonna add also a spin. So let's go into simulation and add a rotation. And this rotation should be, so let's add a field. I'm gonna add a spherical field. It's gonna be like this big. And we're gonna have to add the speed of it. Well, this is too high, so let's add something like 200. And right away, we are seeing that this spins, but this is too fast. And we're just also gonna have to play with this. But I still think that it is too much. I'm gonna set it to, let's set it to 8. So I think 8 looks pretty cool. Let's look at what it looks like in the render. So we are seeing the collision sphere. Let's turn that off in the render. And let's add a light source. I was really kind of breaking my mind when I was trying to light this up perfectly. And the easiest and the most working way was to just put a light in the bottom and a light on the top. I'm gonna add a material. Add this to the Pyro output. And in this material, instead of redshift standard, I'm gonna add a volume. Actually not a standard volume. I'm gonna add just a volume because it has those really cool ramps that you can play with. And plug this inside of volume. So we're not going to see anything, and that is because we have to add a preset. So in the scatter, I'm going to add a Pyro output density. This is what it looks like. And inside of the emission, I'm going to add Pyro output temperature. We're not going to see the temperature right now because in the output object settings, we're having this only on export. And probably before you cache it, even if you turn it on, let's check it out. Oh no, it actually shows up. So yes, this shows up. Let's bump the lights a little bit lower. This is what I was pretty much talking about. You might think that you have a good result looking at the viewport, and then in the render it's completely different. And I'm just gonna have to play with the density settings and the density dissipation because, well, this is all you can do. You can just experiment with this. And if you want a different color, you can set this to color ramp instead of black body and just add a color to the ramp, for example blue, as I had. And now you can just play with the ramp and make this threshold that you want. The only thing that I want to change is the voxel size. And if we change the voxel size in the scene settings, the voxel size, the simulation is going to look completely different. Because, well, you're basically not upscaling it, you're just changing the size of the voxels, and the whole thing is going to calculate different because it is dependent on the voxel size. So instead of doing this, I'm going to go to the Pyro output, and instead of the cache tab, I'm just going to click on the oppress scene, and the factor should be something like 2 or 3 if your voxel size is really really big. I'm gonna stick to 2. I'm gonna upres this. You can save this at the project location or anywhere else. This might take up a lot of space, like a lot of space, if your voxel size is low, so keep that in mind. So I've played with the values for a little while and I came up to this result. All I changed is a little bit of this scatter ramp and the emission ramp, and I also increased the scale. And you can actually increase the scatter value to make it more to make it pass light better, but I think 1 was a good value from the start because I've adjusted the light intensity. So let's begin to create the particles. Let's start from a particle emitter, and that's gonna be in the simulate tab in the emitter, and we're gonna create a mesh emitter. This is also going to create automatically the particle group. And since we baked the smoke, you can turn off the rotation turbulence so the particles will not get affected by that. But if you need to have them both on, you can just call this one Pyro and this one particles. And to exclude them from each other, just place needed forces inside dedicated group. So in particles, I'm going to have another group. I'm going to add a really cool modifier, and it is called a Pyro advect. What this does is basically connects the particles to the Pyro emission. If I select the mesh, so the emitter, in the emission tab, and then increase the rate to something like well actually let's go to 50,000. And let's look at the particles. And this is going to lag a little bit. But as you see, our particles now connect to the Pyro simulation. And this is really cool. And you can do a lot of stuff with this. So if I turn this on, and you can right away see the particles. And the cool thing about this is that you can control how aggressive they connect to the Pyro. So if I set this to 2, they're going to fly even faster than the Pyro. And this is going to create the effect that we actually need, because we don't really need them to stick really close to the actual form. We need them to a little bit go out of the bounds. Well, not like this. So that doesn't happen. I'm going to add a lifetime. This is going to be 25 frames. We can set this higher, so like 55. And only a small amount of particles are gonna go outside. And I think 55 is actually pretty good. We can set the Pyro advect a little bit less intense, so I'm gonna set this to 1.75. This already looks pretty cool. So let's stop right here and add a new modifier. I'm going to add a color mapper, and this color mapper is going to define the colors. So I'm going to set this to age, and from frame 0 to 55, this is going to change the color 3 times. So we can leave the default colors for now, and you're going to see what I mean. So it starts with red, goes to yellow, and then goes to blue. I'm gonna set this one to pink, and yeah, let's look at the simulation. So it's yellow, and then when it dies, it becomes pink. And we can move this closer to the yellow, and I'm gonna set this to blue, since we have the glow, the blue glow. This looks pretty cool. So instead of yellow, I'm going to use something like probably purple to make this transition a little bit more smooth. And this looks really cool. This is like neon colors, and then it becomes pink when it dies. So let's turn on the render, and I'm going to create a new material. We're going to add this to the particles. And in here, I'm going to add a... Actually, I moved the camera. In here, I'm going to add a user data. I'm gonna add color user data, and in the presets, I'm gonna select particles, particle color, and I'm gonna plug this inside of the emission color. So we're gonna plug this inside of the emission color, and I'm gonna turn on the emission to 2, well actually to 1, and then we're gonna bump it up. In the particles, I'm gonna add a render tag, redshift object tag, and in the particles, I'm gonna set this to sphere instances. And those sphere instances are going to be less big, so set it to 0.5. And I think this is still too big. I'm going to set it to 0.35. And instead of making them bigger, I'm going to add the glow intensity a little bit more. And instead of making them bigger, we're going to make more of them. So in the emission tab, instead of 250, I'm going to set it to 750,000 particles. And we're going to see a lot of particles. This is a really big amount of particles. So now it is going to look much better. So this looks pretty cool. So basically this is the whole idea. So anything that you see on this final result that I have is made the way that I just showed you. And I'm gonna touch the compositing part a little bit. In the redshift AOVs, just make sure that you have, well, first of all, the beauty and the emission. This is all you need. And just make sure that you have it as a direct output, and what it's going to give you is an emission pass. So the emission pass looks like this. Well, this is what I did with this emission pass. I basically cut out all the dark parts, and this gave me something like this. And then I added this with an overlay, light and overlay, to the initial object, and then I just added a deep glow on side of this. Yeah, it's actually this simple. So only a deep glow and some sharpening and some real estate motion blur. I believe that is what it's called. All of this is done without motion blur because it would have taken a long time to render. So I just added motion blur with this cool plugin, and this is basically the final output. This is what you can get if you play a little bit with the simulation, and it takes a really long time to get what you actually want. I really hope you liked this video. I will be making a new video soon. Hopefully I don't break a second finger. Goodbye, guys.